Yes, facts. You want them? I've got some of them. So this mountain range out here used to be as high as Mount Everest. It's the starting point of what is potentially the oldest river on the entire planet, and most people that come into Central Australia completely miss it. But what is the West MacDonnell Ranges? That's the question. So the West MacDonnell Ranges, or Tjoritja, as the place has been known by the Arrernte people for thousands of years, is a mountain range that runs west of Alice Springs for about 160 kilometres, with parallel ridges, ancient gorges, and permanent waterholes in one of the driest parts of the entire planet. Though you wouldn't know that at the moment. Apparently we just had the wettest year in 50 years, and it's raining today. And for the lucky people that actually make it out here, they see the surface. They do the gorges, they swim the waterholes, and they drive Namatjira Drive. And that's not wrong, but there are so many more layers to actually understanding and connecting with this place. And this episode is about those layers. So this isn't just a range, it's a record of the earth and of humans. And the best thing to initially delve into in a place like this is the geology. So to begin, I'm going to explain how this entire range was formed. Sunny all of a sudden. What do? And the reason we want to start with the rocks is because they are the foundation of everything in the world, pretty much. And this is one of the best places in Tjoritja, in the West MacDonnell Ranges, to convey the simplicity of what has happened out here over hundreds of millions of years. Starting with these rocks that I'm on, those rocks over there, and those rocks up there. Where do we begin? Haha! And the best way to explain these processes is in the sand. So very similar to the Uluru story, it starts with the collapsing of what is known as the Arrernte block. So this is Australia for all intensive purposes, and around about 900 million years ago, Laurentia, or North America, broke away from here. And that created some changes within the landscape. There was a bit of a stretching of an ancient metamorphosized block of desert that essentially collapsed here. Yes. So when the Arrernte block collapsed, okay, and for scale, that's a human being, didn't exist. But you know that that's up. So the Arrernte block basically collapsed. And that meant that this, what was the ground surface, had a huge trough-like basin running right through it. So this ended up filling up with the sea. So ocean came in and created a big layer of quartzite. And that quartzite would become the base of all of the sediments that would fill into this range. So eventually, over millions of years and different eras and epochs, different layers came in, and they were shallow oceans, they were stromatolites, they were thick oceans, they were ice ages, they were all kinds of different things that were going on. And then we've got the Cambrian, and then we've got the Devonian. All right, Arrernte block fills up. This process just took a few seconds, but in reality, that was around about 450 million years of stuff going into that. All right, you with me? Cool. And then eventually, we had what is known as the Alice Springs Orogeny, and that was a massive crushing of all of the landscape within the central desert. So in different parts of the desert, different things happened. Uluru, the whole area spun around. Here, the forces were so cataclysmic that essentially this whole thing was pushed up like that. Yeah. Now, in reality, different parts of the range were put under different forces. It's kind of like saying if a car crashes into a wall, that the car is going backwards. But in reality, there are parts of the car that are going forwards, parts of the car that are going this way and that way and being wrapped around each other. So even though we're keeping this process really, really simple, different things happened in different places. And for the bulk of it, this entire basin, keeping it simple, was pushed up on its side, like this. Yeah, that's keeping it simple, folks, because in reality, there are parts of the range that were pushed together like this. So you've got old, 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 new, 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 old, old, old. And then you've got certain parts where the forces essentially spun the whole thing backwards. So you've got these older rocks on top, and then you've got the younger rocks below. But for the purposes of understanding what is going on, this is what you need to focus on. So if we're running with the chronological order of things, if this layer here is the oldest, being the 850 million year old heavy tree quartzite, as we're moving this way through the range, it's getting younger and younger and younger and younger. So as I said, it is a little bit more complicated than that, but for the essence of what we're looking at and what we're learning about, this is pretty much exactly what happened. And these lines are evident through the landscape. Yeah, and some of these lines were more solid than others. The heavy tree quartzite, very solid. And then you've got a little gap, and then something a little more solid. And then you've got softer sediments, and then you've got a big build-up, and that's kind of what the range looks like. Tjoritja, the West Macs. That's as simple as I can make it. Whenever I've got the camera on like this, I feel like that train dude. And the reason this is one of the best places to do this talk isn't because this is the only part of the range where it is completely obvious, where you can see all these chronologically conforming stratigraphic segments, but it is because one of the most popular tourist attractions in the area is Ellery Creek Big Hole, which is 2 kilometers this way. And that has great diagrams where you can actually study the geology and learn from that and apply it to real life as you're traveling just between this road and that range. In essence, from here to that range back there, which is the heavy tree quartzite and the basement of that ocean, from there to here, it's about 2 kilometers. And from there to here, in terms of geological sedimentary deposits, you're looking at about 250 million years. So if you punch the numbers and put that into a calculator, you divide the time by the distance by what an average human step is, every step that you take walking from here towards that range, you're going back in time around about 40,000 years. And the opposite applies as well. As you're walking out this way, every step you take, you're going forward in time about 40,000 years. So that is a vast generalization, but it puts into perspective exactly what has happened out here. Yeah, so I hope with that explanation, as you come through this landscape, you're able to actually look at all of these strata lines and see that they are essentially pages in the book of the Earth's diary, which it kept very detailed records of right through this part of the world. Amazing. A giant frozen ocean flipped over on its side. What more do you want? What more do you want? And as beautiful and as simple as that is, not every geological formation here in the West MacDonnell Range National Park was created by the Earth's forces. There is one massive geological formation out here that was actually created from something coming from out of space. This is Gosse's Bluff, and this is one of the best preserved meteor impact craters on the entire planet. Yes, I might get excited on this one. So there's 2 stories here. One is scientific and one is cultural, but ultimately they both have the same impact, no pun intended, and same result. But one is rooted in physics and one is rooted in story. But either way, they both explain what has happened here. So in terms of a scientific understanding, it is understood that a comet around about 600 meters wide hit the Earth here about 142 million years ago. And that impact of what they believe was a comet hit the ground here, traveling at around about 50 kilometers a second. And what we're looking at here with the rim, this isn't the impact crater, this is just the central uplift. Yeah, so when you throw a rock in water, the ripples go out, but the central area gets completely turned over. And that is what you are looking at here. So with something this immense, it's hard to put it really into perspective, especially when the central uplift here is only a small part of the entire impact. And to put another layer of how much this landscape has changed in terms of what it would have looked like not too long after the impact, over 140 million years, the entire landscape around here has eroded down by about 2 kilometers. So it's hard to actually imagine what this place would have looked like, because this here was 2 kilometers underneath the Earth's surface at the time of impact. I would love to be able to go back and actually see the impact itself from a safe vantage point, but it just would have been huge, absolutely huge. And it even looks big now, but this is just a drop. Yeah. And the arid environment has basically preserved this for us to marvel at many millions of years later. So the central ring is a 5-kilometer circle of these uplifted rocks, but the original impact crater was about 20 kilometers wide. So if you're looking at a dartboard and you see the bullseye, this is essentially the bullseye, and what made up the rest of the dartboard has eroded away over 140 million years. Crazy. So in terms of European naming, it is known as Gosse's Bluff, and in terms of the local indigenous culture for the West Arrernte people, it is known as Tnorala. And for the West Arrernte, this is an extremely special place. Yeah, not just in terms of the creation story connected to it, which involves women that were dancing in the sky. One of them put their baby in a wooden baby bowl on the side while they were dancing. The baby carrier fell off and came crashing down to earth. So in the creation story, the rim going around the creator represents the actual carrying bowl that was flipped over and hit the ground. And the baby is now lost underneath the sand, and the evening star and the morning star are the parents of the baby who are continuously looking for her. And aside from the story itself, this was a very important ceremonial area and a place where meetings and groups would connect, and where they would also come to gather really unique foods and fruits that weren't found in many other places in the desert. And that is essentially because the impact that happened here turned over so much soil that it's given rise to the ability for a lot of different plants to be able to germinate and thrive here. But unfortunately, due to a few different factors involving introduced animals and things that were taken from the area in terms of a cultural sense, the same plants and fruits that used to grow here in abundance don't grow here so much unless there's been really big rains. So I was talking to one of the traditional landowners whose country this is, and I told him how beautiful I thought it was, and he actually was a little bit sad to say that the entire area, not just within the crater but all around, has, in terms of what it used to be like, completely changed. And he put that largely down to cattle, camels and horses, but especially the camels. So I was actually out here with a tour group last week, and I was lucky enough to have a doctor or professor of geology and astronomy on the tour, and he asked me if I'd seen any of the shatter cones. I made a joke about shattering cones, but eventually I actually looked into what he was talking about and found out that those shatter cones were the first real evidence that geologists had to confirm that this was an impact crater. So for decades before the 1960s, once this was confirmed, geologists had argued endlessly about what had actually created this entire site here. So I just took a bit of time to walk down the creek bed, and I found some rocks that seemed to show all the hallmarks of shatter cones. And after verifying what I found with my geologist friend, he agreed that they are shatter cones. So these are unique to impact craters, and they are found nowhere else. And that's all due to the intense impact and energy that was transferred through the rocks at the point of creation. Crazy. So from an ancient impact to the ancient rocks themselves, it all ties in with an ancient people that have been living here and calling this home for over 60,000 years. And these people are the West Arrernte. So where we are at the moment is a part of the West Arrernte Nation. As a whole is quite large and it's divided up into different areas. And over the 14 years I've spent out here, I've had a lot of lucky interactions and relationships develop with different people from central, eastern, western Arrernte country who have been kind enough to show me hospitality, give me information, share stories about history, culture and language. And when we talk about the people from here connected to this place, we're not talking about ancient history. This is one of the world's longest continuous cultural connections to a single place. And right around Australia there's many different indigenous groups and cultures and traditions and languages, but the two main factors that differentiate between different groups are language and country. And with people like Baldwin Spencer, Frank Gillen, and the missionaries that came out here in the late 1800s, there have been more records and details kept from the West Arrernte than a lot of other groups around Australia. And this is a part of the destruction and preservation of culture, which seem to go hand in hand. So when you're talking about specific groups, unless you're talking about language or country, it's hard to go into details that separate different cultures without stepping over lines and talking about things that shouldn't be talked about. Because either I don't know them or I don't have the right to pass that information on. And because I have connections out of the local community here, I don't feel it's my right to be able to go into too much detail without having the people that I know present and telling their own story. So one day I'd like to do an episode that just focuses on general Indigenous culture, and for that I would like to have Indigenous friends of mine be a part of that, so that we can pass on a general kind of understanding of how Indigenous cultures worked in terms of creation stories, songlines, traditions, ceremonies, men's business, women's business. But these topics unto themselves are a whole series, which would take a lot of time and a lot of cooperation with people who are from the culture and can share the stories. Yeah, so this particular site here is the ochre pits, and this was a site of significant commodity for a trading tool known as ochre, which was used for ceremonial purposes, medicinal purposes, and it was one of the most valuable trading tools because this was one of the major ochre pits that we have in Australia, and ochre from here has been found all around the country, hundreds and hundreds of kilometres away. So quite often different things from different parts of the country would be traded into areas where it wasn't available, like ochre, like greenstone, pitchery, a native tobacco. So the best thing I can do for you in terms of understanding more about the culture here is rerouting you to a fantastic TV series called First Australians that was filmed by SBS here in Australia. And one of the episodes in particular relates directly to the West Arrernte people, and that goes into what happened when the missionaries came out here, and there's lots of interviews with the elders and first-hand experiences of the West Arrernte people and their connection with country, culture, and what has happened over the last 150 years. So I'll put a link to that series down below. And if you want to delve further into the cultural side of things, it's best you do that with people who are from the culture, who are representing the stories from their experience. So one of the most important parts of traditional cultures through here is their intrinsic connection and understanding of everything, through kinship systems, through creation stories, through songlines, through relationships, through ceremony. Everyone was connected to everything, and every plant, animal and special site had meaning and had connection. And the way they lived out here for tens of thousands of years went relatively unchanged, except for having to adjust to major changes in the earth, like climate change, the coming and going of ice ages. Things out here stayed, in terms of culture, the same for a long time, until the 1870s, when something arrived here that changed everything forever. And this time it didn't come from outer space, it came from Germany. 1877 marked the arrival of German Lutheran missionaries to this piece of land here that is now known as Hermannsburg, around 130 kilometres west of Alice Springs. And missionaries coming to Australia to try to introduce the notion of God to the indigenous people was not uncommon, but the German missionaries that ended up out here were the first Christian mission settlement in Central Australia. And they decided this was the best place and the best people to teach the word of God. Ultimately, it became a real collision point of completely different ways of seeing the world, and the outcome of that collision ultimately resulted in quite unexpected results, quite positive and negative. Yeah, the German missionaries arrived. They brought their European structures, dress, language, religion, agriculture, and imposed/introduced it to the West Arrernte people. So there's aspects of the devastation of the traditional culture that was out here, but there is also the aspect of the records that were kept in very, very fine detail by the missionaries. Yeah, so one almost feels inclined to judge this place as being positive or negative, but there's such a mixed history here. Yeah, and from what I've seen with people that I know in the community, these two worlds have been combined. So there is a big history here with Hermannsburg and what it was and what it has become today, and the people that live here. And of all the people from Hermannsburg who attended the mission, the most famous person is a man called Albert Namatjira, who was one of Australia's most famous artists. And this is the house of Albert Namatjira. So I knew the basics of who Albert Namatjira was before I came up here, because he was one of the most famous Australians in the 20th century. He was renowned for his artwork, which was sold around Australia and around the world, resulting in such fame and notoriety that he ended up being coronated by the Queen in 1957. And Albert's style of painting, representing the landscape that we're in here at the moment, delivered an insight into a landscape and a scenery that most people had never seen before. And Albert, having the connection that he had, was able to bring these images to life. So in a bittersweet twist of fate, Albert, having the recognition that he had from essentially the Queen, opened up the possibilities for him to become an Australian citizen. And he did, and in so doing became the first Indigenous Australian ever. Yeah, but this was a real double-edged sword, because as he became a part of the Australian culture, but being deeply rooted in his traditional culture, they were two worlds that couldn't really live together. If he was sticking to the laws in one culture, he was breaking them in the other, and vice versa. Yeah, so amongst many situations, ultimately Albert ended up being convicted for supplying alcohol to one of his relatives, allegedly, which put him into a prison in Papunya, a couple of 100 kilometres that way. Yeah, and this was really the beginning of the end for Albert, because as an Aboriginal man, he couldn't really live in Alice Springs, and as an Australian man, he couldn't really live out here in Hermannsburg. So he was caught in limbo between these two worlds, and he wasn't actually able to really be a part of either. 6 months after that, his wife passed away, and then another 6 months after that, Albert, his heart failed, unfortunately, while he was painting a scene near Alice Springs. So a lot of people believe that his heartbreak and inability to actually have the relationship that he needed with his family, community and country, it broke his heart. Yeah. Albert Namatjira, where do we fucking go from there? Yeah, and Albert's artistry and vision revolved a lot around capturing the life that is out here in an environment that should seemingly almost not accommodate plants. There is an abundance here. And the bulk of the plants out here are made up of a variety of eucalypts, including Gosse gums, river red gums, bloodwoods and mallees, as well as wattles / acacias, desert oaks, different shrubs and flowers, and a variety of native grasses, just to name a few. And we're not going to delve into all of these plants, because in reality each one of these plants has a story and has a system, has a place, and has a million different uses, especially when it comes to being used and understood by the local Indigenous people. So what I'm going to touch on with the plants is one plant which is predominant that we don't want here, because it's interesting to at least acknowledge it. And then we're going to talk about a couple of plants that have managed to survive here, before this place actually became a desert. So first of all, because it's staring me in the face, I'm going to talk about this horrible thing here. This is buffle grass. Yeah. And to give you an idea, there are a lot of beautiful Australian native grasses, and especially out here, quite predominantly it is the spinifex, which is found in these clumped bundles throughout the desert. But many years ago, some bright person decided to introduce bufflegrass to A, keep the sand dunes and the road tracks together, and B, create a fast-spreading nutritional grass that the cattle could eat. So they introduced bufflegrass. Now bufflegrass has spread absolutely everywhere, to the point where it's actually choked out a lot of native grasses. So that's had its environmental impacts on the grasses that it's affected, and also for the animals that ate and lived in the native grasses. But on a more interesting note, throughout the ranges here, we have 17 relic plants. So relic plants are basically survivors from our wetter time, when the landscape through here wasn't the arid desert that we'd know. It was actually quite wet, subtemperate, and was covered in vast woodlands. So as Australia has drifted north and the weather has changed and things have got a lot hotter and drier out here, some of those plants have managed to survive in nooks and crannies within the ranges. And these plants include a variety of smaller plants like ferns and mosses, but it also includes two very big plants which are found here and nowhere else on the entire planet, tucked away in places like this at Stanley Chasm. The MacDonnell Ranges Cycads are one of the most unique plants that we have out here. It's estimated that they marched inland through a green corridor from the east between 3 and 5 million years ago, and then got cut off about 2 million years ago when the continent dried out. Its closest relative is about 1,000 kilometers away. Yeah, so apart from the fact that this has been living here well before there was ever any desert, these cycads are interesting because they're a male and female plants, and they've been reproducing since before bees could give a helping hand. And in essence, they reproduce similar to humans with sperm and eggs. So when females are ready, they will produce a clump of red nuts, and the males will produce this elongated pine cone kind of thing. And it's left down to chance, to wind, and to small little insects called thrips to potentially carry that sperm onto the egg for these plants to reproduce. So it doesn't happen often, but it does happen. Very cool. So if you follow the Finke River down through the range past south of Hermannsburg, you'll end up in Palm Valley, which is home to a little grove of Red Cabbage Palm, which is a tropical palm species found in the dead centre of the Australian Outback, which is a biological impossibility. For over a century it was believed that these plants were survivors from an inland tropical rainforest, and that they were lucky to survive. But through modern science with molecular clock analysis, the leading theory now is that seeds from these plants were actually brought down from the north by humans in the last 30 to 15,000 years. And this actually runs in line with traditional oral history. So these trees in this particular site could actually be a living map of ancient human travel, planted right here in a deep sandstone refuge where the permanent water table keeps them alive. So if you really want to delve deep into the plants out here in Tjoritja, around Alice Springs, you're best to look into the works of a scientist called Peter Latz. He is the leading expert in terms of ecology and ethnobotany out here, and having grown up in Hermannsburg and studied these plants his whole life, there's a wide variety of books that he has written on all of the plants and their uses. So that is a really beautiful rabbit hole to go down into. Yeah, so these protected areas of shade and water have given life to plants that have been here for millions of years. And usually where you find plants, shelter and water, you will also find animals as well. And this part of the world is no different. If I was really going to try to present you animals here now, my best bet would be to either to get covered in ants or to drape some caterpillars around my neck. Because animals out here are quite elusive. So unless you're looking for birds of prey, ants or flies, you're probably going to have to do some tracking to find the animals out here. But to give you a brief idea of what is out here, of course you have the rare appearance of animals like emus and kangaroos. You got these guys here. What are they? Galahs. Thanks for the appearance. Good timing. You've got your galahs, you've got your parrots, you've got your birds of prey, you've got your hawks, your eagles, your kites, your kestrels. You've got a plethora of different reptiles, your lizards and dragons and monitors, two of which are very interesting, one being the thorny devil and is able to drink just by standing in water. And we also have the Arrernte, which is a close relative to the Komodo dragon and is the second biggest lizard in the world. Then you've got the cute ones like the spinifex pigeons and one of my favorites, the butcher bird. And in terms of interesting animals that should almost not be found out here, we have the black-footed rock wallaby, which lives just upstream here in Simpson's Gap. And we have the Centralian tree frog. Tweet, tweet. Got your snakes and your spiders and everything else. So there is a world of animals out here, but you're probably not going to see many of them. But once you do get to the west end of the range, kind of between Hermannsburg and Red Bank Gorge, you've got a good chance of seeing wild horses or brumbies, camels and cattle. Yeehaw! So those introduced animals, including the feral cats, have changed a lot of things out here. It's not exactly the same balance it used to be. Yeah, but regardless of whether we have favourites or we don't think certain animals should be here, they're all here because of one major reason. And that's this stuff here. So this year has actually been one of the wettest years apparently we've had for 30 or 50 years. Massive torrential rains and floods, and you can see how high some of the organic debris got lodged into the trees, which gives you an idea of how much water there was. Yeah, so even though we don't get much rain out here anymore, these river systems are a huge and ancient part of life out here in Tjoritja. And not just little river systems, but we have one in particular that ties life, culture and land together, and it has done for possibly the longest amount of time out of any river in the world. And it all relates to this river here, which is traditionally known as Larapinta, but in English it is known as the Finke River. And this is one of the oldest river systems on the entire planet, dated back up in the northern sections through here between 350 and 400 million years. And this river has been flowing even before the mountain ranges themselves were pushed up. And as they were pushed up, the river just kept cutting through it. And this is what is known as an antecedent river, which kind of puts into perspective how long this river's been here, how long the mountains have been here, and how long time itself is just doing its thing. So now the river is ephemeral, which means it flows when it's raining. But 30 to 40 million years ago, it was still continuously flowing all the way into Lake Eyre in the outback of South Australia. So the Finke itself, much like the other river systems flowing through this region, are all easily recognisable from a distance because of all of the river red gums that dot along the course of the riverbed itself. And apart from the natural science, hydrology and geology connected to the Finke, it was also a very, very important part of traditional cultures, not just up here, but through every single one of the different language groups that the river passed through. One thing it's almost impossible to ignore while you're here in the West MacDonnell Ranges with your feet in the sand and learning about the rocks and the river systems and the cultures is the sense of time, timefulness and timelessness. Yeah. Yeah. There's some places where pictures and information really convey the place. But this is a living landscape. And this particular place requires time, and it requires a bit of silence and a bit of space to actually tune into it. It's a really special place, apart from the magnificence of it all. If I had a choice of middle of summer or winter, I would take winter. Definitely. I find summer out here quite offensive. Yeah, so this video isn't about giving you all, like, it's not a lecture, it's not, you can't get a degree. I just want to give people a taster of what places are about, and give people the opportunity to see what resonates or interests them, if anything, and have the choice then to delve further into it. Because there's so much information, each one of these topics. You know, you could make a 10-hour series on each of them. But I just want to introduce things to people. Yeah, and it's not a travel show, and it's just a shared enthusiasm show. That's what it's about. Yeah, and if you do have the chance to come out here, make sure that you have the time to actually connect with the place. Yeah. So that is Tjoritja, or a little bit of it anyway. Yeah, so from me, from here, we will see you somewhere else next time. Maybe Switzerland, maybe Turkey, maybe Australia, maybe on one of my tours out here. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. Cool. So, yeah, that's it. Officially, this is my first ever proper YouTube episode, and I've been working towards this for about 5 years. So as this is the first, please let me know what you thought of it, and let me know where you would like to go in the future. Thanks for watching, and I hope I can take you on many of these little educational adventures right around the world for many years to come.